Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we are diving into episode 121 after about 3-week break. And I want to thank you for your patience and understanding while I was on this mini 3-week hiatus or a break from the podcast. I was able to spend a rare, totally work-free week with my family on vacation at Lake Ontario, where I spent a lot of time looking at the beautiful landscape and waterscape and sitting on the porch in a rocking chair reading fiction books. It was fabulous. I also got some nice quality time with just my husband and I, a couple different types of dates we went on, and of course some wonderful time with my boys and their friends. And I think, as a little plug here, everybody, all highly sensitive people, should make sure to take breaks in their lives from time to time. I'm also super happy to be back here with you, and today we are going to dive into topic I haven't discussed, which is kind of crazy, on the podcast yet, which is empathy. We are going to be spending some time today looking at the gifts of empathy and the challenges of empathy in our relationships as highly sensitive people, and actually how we as HSPs can use our natural empathy for greater intimacy in our relationships. So although it's generally believed that not all highly sensitive people are technically empaths, all HSPs tend to have a capacity for strong empathy. And this really is a gift when it comes to relationships, although I know it cannot always feel that way. But it does give us the ability really to have a very rich, connected relationship. The most connected, rich relationships on the planet. I talk about that as one of our beautiful assets as being a highly sensitive person. And a large part of this is due to our capacity for empathy. But our empathy does sometimes or oftentimes feel like it comes with a downside in our relationships. And I believe it's a downside that you can avoid with a bit of learning. So let's look at how our empathy helps us, how it can hurt, and what you can do to really maximize your natural powers of empathy for the benefit of your relationship. So, in a nutshell, empathy means feeling what others feel. The dictionary definition is slightly different. It's like having sympathy for or having sensitivity for other people's feelings. So I think that there is somewhat of a range of definitions and experiences with it. But I would say that having deep empathy is the closest we can come as human beings to being in another person's skin and experience, right? Like helping us have a felt sense of what the other person is going through. And because of that, because it really allows us to understand others on a pretty deep level, it can lead to a kind of intimacy with that person that is really unsurpassed. So that's really the bright side of empathy. It really allows us understanding of and sensitivity towards and even connection and closeness with another human being, which is beautiful, right? That's like one of the definitions of intimacy and part of what makes a romantic relationship or a marriage really rich and successful. Therefore, as an HSP with empathy, you tend to be aware of your partner's and your loved one's feelings and tend to be subtly attuned to what they're experiencing internally, like kind of almost as if you could read their mind, sometimes before they even know what's going on for themselves, right? So you easily pick up on their subtle cues, their emotional cues, and that has this effect for other people in our lives of helping them feel understood and cared for. Well, I've said it before. Part of this, kind of as a side note, is part of our capacity for empathy is that we have these mirror neurons, all humans do, which function really particularly well. They're very fine-tuned and very active and highly sensitive people. So we're incredibly good at noticing and reading others. So with good skills in place, our empathetic ability can help de-escalate conflict quickly. It can, along those same lines, help you sense under like the less than ideal behaviors your partner might exhibit, right? Like if they're being critical, for example, it can help you sense into the deeper wants and like the hurting parts of them that are leading to them being critical of you. If you took part in the Stop Taking It Personally challenge, that will resonate, right? We talked about that. And when you can sense into kind of what's really going on under the surface of their not so wonderful behavior, it can help reduce your frustration and kind of impatience with them and reactivity to them, and really help you respond in a way that soothes the situation instead of escalating it. So that's part of why your empathy can kind of avoid conflicts or de-escalate them. And one of the beautiful things about your empathy is there's a tendency for friends and loved ones to feel seen and understood by you. And that leads to them feeling known, or what Daniel Siegel calls feeling felt. Like that we all humans have a need or an emotional need to feel felt. And I'm sure that many of you resonate with that. So having this empathy allows others in your life to feel known, to feel felt, and to feel accepted and safe with you. Safe to be themselves, safe to share of themselves, safe to love you, safe to be affectionate, all of these things. And a fun thing about empathy is that when your loved ones, when your partner, when your kids, when your friends are happy and in a positive place emotionally, that actually really lifts you up. And then you kind of feed that upliftedness back to them. Because actually all of us have some level of empathy, actually almost all of us, right? And can sense and respond to other people's emotions to some degree. So your mirroring, i.e. taking in and reflecting other people's positive emotions, can actually elevate a happy moment into an even more positive one. So, for example, think of like a time your partner told you some good news, something that happened that he was really happy about. And then you kind of sensed his happiness and kind of took it in and then responded enthusiastically to it. And thereby kind of added to his joy, because right, he's happy now, you're happy. And then you're seeing him even more happy, and then you're feeling even more happy, right? It's kind of like this positive snowball effect. It's kind of fun. So, as you can see, empathy is a beautiful asset, a beautiful gift in your relationships. And it really can open the door to the deepest kind of connection possible with another human being, which is wonderful. And really, I see this regularly with my clients, is like what beautiful capacity when they learn how to kind of channel it and get some other stuff out of the way, my clients have to really connect with their honey. But empathy also has a more challenging side. And I've had many clients share that their high empathy drags them down, like really drains them and makes their relationship harder. And I have had that experience. And this oftentimes happens because without certain skills in place, we sensitive, empathetic people can become emotionally overloaded and distressed because of our empathy, right? It can feel like, so some of you will really get this more than others, but I think all of us will get this to some degree. It can feel like we're being contaged by other people's feelings. Contaged, like you're catching their feelings. And, this is oftentimes actually called emotional contagion. So if you often take on your partner's or a friend's grumpy moods or anxiety or depression, what's going to happen is you'll likely feel really bogged down yourself, right? You'll feel depleted of energy and kind of get that feeling of wanting to hide in a cave. But you're also, aside from that, like that's no fun in the first place. But in addition to that, you're likely to end up resentful at the other people, especially if they're these people in your life are, often in a bad mood or grumpy or irritable. You're likely to feel some resentment about that because of their suffering, right? Because being around them seems to zap your energy and bring you down. And it can kind of seem like their fault, right? Like this person brings me down, right? Being around this person brings me down. And so like, you're not going to really want to be around them. Make sense? And especially if you're like married to this person, it can be a recipe for resentment because like you kind of have to be around them, right? And then if you're thinking of it as like they're making you, they're contaging you in this way, it's not a recipe for success or fulfillment or happiness in the relationship, right? And it also makes you like, it zaps your energy, and so it makes you less able to like support them or yourself. So a little story about this. Back in the day with my first husband, it was actually somewhat close to the end of our marriage. It was part of what made it hard. And I honestly felt pretty awful about this for a long time afterwards. He one day went to work and came home in the middle of the day with a broken finger. And, he had to go back the next day to have surgery, and it was a really bad break. And he was in a lot of pain, and also very, his emotions were really negative and strong. Like he was very upset. Now, being pretty empathic myself, although I didn't feel his physical pain, I felt like his intense emotions felt pretty overwhelming to me. And again, I felt guilty for this behavior, but when that was happening, I was not able to be the person I wanted to be. I was not able to be warm and compassionate and kind when he was in this pain. I found myself getting really irritable. Basically, my emotions became like I was mad at him for being so negative and upset. I felt really bogged down by his pain. And this is a kind of extreme example, but I think this kind of thing in smaller ways happens a lot in our relationships as highly sensitive people. I mean, I hear about it a lot from clients. So, and it's one of the most common questions I get is like, how do I handle when I'm feeling other people's feelings, right? And what I want to offer is that this like bogged down, feeling so contagious, feeling drained and upset when other people are upset, this is preventable and or easable, right? The good news is that if you find yourself struggling with other people's feelings, right, or irritable when they're grumpy or burdened and bogged down by how much of other people's pain you feel, you really can develop a set of skills that it takes to move from like a draining, disempowering kind of empathy, like I was in that story about my husband breaking his hand, and move into what I think of as an empowered kind of empathy. And really, in other words, like maximize your natural powers of empathy, again, for the benefit of yourself and the relationship. So I, of course, wish I had known how to do this when my husband broke his finger all those years ago, but I didn't. But I've come a long way since then. So there are various ways to work with this kind of sort of disempowered empathy or this emotional contagion, including learning what we can think of as energetic boundaries. Some of you have heard of that or learned how to set some of those energetic boundaries. I do teach and work with my clients on this kind of disempowering empathy in some depth, various ways. And I will talk briefly about one other way we can work with it next week because it's really related to next week's topic. But for today, let's dive into one primary and really powerful way. And I'm really focusing on this way today because I think it's a primary way to work on this. And you've heard me talking about this a lot in different ways, but it's such a powerful shift that we can make. And that is to call on your power of compassion. So the cool thing is that compassion is just a tiny shift of your attention away from empathy, right? It's like turning the dial 1 degree on that volume button or whatever, or the radio station dial. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. So compassion includes empathy, but unlike empathy, which can lead to being kind of enmeshed in the other person's pain, as we've just been talking about, compassion comes with a quality of what I think of as warmth of heart. And that's a quality that actually energizes you to show up with a kind of natural overflow of supportiveness and care. So here's a tiny bit of science that helps us understand why compassion feels good and empathy not so much. And I find this really fascinating. So whereas empathy lights up the areas of the human brain associated with pain, compassion lights up the part of the brain associated with pleasure. That's pretty fascinating. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Because some people, and even myself, have used the word compassion and empathy interchangeably, but they are not the same. Compassion is pleasurable. Fascinating. Also, when you are in compassion, oxytocin, which is that bonding hormone that floods us with those warm, pleasurable feelings, right? It's like one of the big feelings that's one of the big hormones that's circulating when we are newly in love, when we are, with a newborn baby, right? It's like the love hormone, right? So when you are feeling compassion, oxytocin is released in your system. So that really benefits you with those warm, fuzzy feelings. Yeah? Whereas with empathy, you're much more likely to be flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, etc. Right? Because especially when that other person is in some kind of emotional pain. And again, I don't think that's a prerequisite. I don't think that's always the case. And maybe we'll be able to talk enough about that next week that this will make more sense, or even a little later today. But main point right now is that the key difference between empathy and compassion is that when we're feeling compassion, we're not exactly experiencing the other's pain with them anymore. But we're rather feeling care for them while they are experiencing their pain, right? As well as a desire to help. Another way of putting this is we know their pain. We know it because we've had that same type of pain before. We've been there, but we're not taking it into our system. We're not taking it on as our own currently. We've turned our attention, right? That little dial just to shift. We've turned our attention to caring, to holding them in our hearts with love, with warmth, with care. And we are therefore energized to take action on their behalf from a resourced space, right? A warmth of heart that feels nourishing to us. So it feels good to us and is supportive to them. So when we empathetic, sensitive people shift from empathy into compassion, everyone benefits. So if I had known how to do this when my first husband broke his finger all those years ago, that time could have actually been, if not fun, at least a caring, loving experience where I felt good about myself and he felt cared for. So I know those of you who kind of struggle with emotional contagion and feeling brought down by your partner's bad moods, you're curious, how do you make this subtle shift over from empathy to compassion? This is how. You shift the focus from this feels awful, right? It's almost like the self-focus of like, I feel all this stuff. I feel all the feelings. To, oh, they are hurting and I care. I care about their pain. I care about them. So let's try it. Let's have you try it now. Try it yourself. Call to mind a time a loved one was in a bad mood. And you might notice that your empathetic tendency might be to feel that bad mood too. Right? To think like, oh, this feels awful. To just really be in the feelings that they're having and now you're having. So call to mind a time that happened and kind of put yourself back there. And as you're back there, you're kind of feeling that experience. I want you to try saying to yourself, I care about them in their pain. I found it can actually help to put your hand on your heart. Right? It kind of calls your attention to that area. I care about them in their pain. And then feel into that sense of care. Notice how that feeling of care, that warmth of heart, gets energized. Can you feel that? That's compassion. So if you need to, please pause this and do this little exercise. And you can then notice that from this feeling, you might sense a desire to kind of want to do something to support them. Even if it's as simple and small as sending a little well wish their way. But there can be this tendency, or there is this tendency to kind of want to act on their behalf. Now, I want to be careful with this piece because it's important for me to emphasize that you don't have to do anything overly helpful. You're not required to. So don't mistake having compassion for some like duty you must do like to fix your person or help them. And I say that because I think if we feel we have to do something to help them, then their emotions, their hard emotions can then once again become a burden to us, right? Because then suddenly it means like every time they have a bad emotion, we then have to turn it into action that we take, which could be exhausting, right? And you might even notice that you may feel you're taking on those emotions again. Like if I think he's upset, now I have to do something about it. What's going to happen is I'll slip out of compassion and into a sense of duty and burden and hating it when he gets upset. So this is the side note that I'll talk about a little bit more next week, but I feel like I can't not mention it here, which is that this really illustrates that the way that we are thinking about other people's feelings is a huge source of either the ease and the peace we feel or the pain and the suffering we feel when those other people are having those feelings. We could probably I know we could do a whole podcast. It would probably be a long podcast just on this piece of it, is that like how we think about feelings and other humans having feelings is like, if we think that it's bad to have negative feelings, which honestly many of us have been conditioned to think or believe in our society, like that negative emotions are bad, that we shouldn't be feeling them, that others shouldn't have to feel them. That's actually going to really make us feel bad when other people are having bad feelings. And so oftentimes I actually find that people think they're always being emotionally contagious, right, by other people's feelings, but they're actually just having really painful thoughts about those people having hard feelings. And I have to say that I catch myself in that still sometimes. Just this morning, my husband picked up the peanut butter by the cap, and the cap wasn't fully on. My fault. It's a bad habit I have. And the peanut butter fell and splashed all over the floor, and he yelled, and he makes these loud dramatic sounds when things like that happen. And then he started blaming me for it. Now, he was just reacting out of his upset emotion, but I immediately started feeling negative emotion too. And as I looked at what was coming up for me, I realized there was this like sneaky belief in the background, or those beliefs in the basement I've talked about, that were like, he shouldn't feel angry. And I was therefore feeling angry because I was thinking he shouldn't feel angry, like as if anger is a bad, problematic thing. And yes, I know that it can lead to problems, right? But to have an upset, angry reaction about peanut butter spilling all over the floor right before he had to go to work, like kind of normal and human. And really not a problem unless I make it a problem with my judgment. So that was definitely a side note. It might be a light bulb for some of you, but it's definitely an important piece of the puzzle to not get so dragged down by other people's hard emotional states, right? And we'll definitely talk more about this in the future. But for now, do notice that compassion is a warmth of heart feeling that feels pretty good and creates a kind of welling up of desire to tend to your person or the other person, to offer support. It's not a duty that you have to fulfill, but it's a natural desire that comes up within you to act on their behalf, to offer support. And again, that can be as small as literally sending them prayers, putting your hand on their shoulder and saying, I'm sorry you're having a hard time, or telling them that you care, right? It doesn't have to be a big thing, and you don't need to make their feelings go away. You don't have to fix them or their pain. So although it can take some skill and fine-tuning to channel your empathy into compassion and kind of not take it on and get so bogged down by it, it's really worth, as a highly sensitive person, learning how to do this and really just applying what I've shared today, like specifically around the compassion piece. As you get better at this, you know, it really, your empathy can become such a positive force of connection for both you and the people that you're in a relationship with, so that, you know, it's not just going to benefit the people who are lucky enough to come into your life, like your partner, but it will benefit and nourish you too by bringing you the kind of fulfilling connection that you, as a highly sensitive person, really thrive on. And I want to just kind of close today by reminding you that the truth is there is a general lack of empathy in our world today and in many intimate relationships these days. And we sensitives are naturally gifted with bringing that empathy and compassion wherever we go. And when we learn to work with our huge capacity for empathy to keep ourselves well, we sensitive people are really a force of connection and healing that our world deeply needs. So I just celebrate you and encourage you deeply. If empathy overload or emotional contagion does kind of feature in your life, I highly recommend really learning how to work with it, because it truly is such an asset for you and the world. All right, my friends, be oh so well.